Rich families of the Gilded Age lived lives nearly unimaginable today. The Gilded Age wealth disparity was so extreme that people today often compare them to what modern society terms the 1% class. Excess touched every single aspect of daily life in the Gilded Age, from servants changing bed linens several times a day to high-end fashion and jewelry, and to the grand daily feasts. Here are some of the dumbest ways people in the Gilded Age spent their money. Rich women nearly caused a bird to go extinct. During the late 19th century, fashionable women became enchanted with the luminous, wispy, gorgeous feathers of the snowy egret. Not just any feathers, but the ones that grew when the delicate birds were in breeding season, when they were preparing to give birth to their young. The women needed those feathers for their hats, dresses, and fans, even for their home decor. The demand grew greater and greater until the snowy egret was endangered and nearing extinction status. To the credit of at least 2 society women, the species was saved at the last minute. An enormous campaign to protect the snowy egret and other birds killed for their feathers resulted in the Migratory Bird Act of 1913. Lavish costume balls and theme parties were the standard. The rich of the Gilded Age literally had more money than they knew what to do with, so they were always scouting about to find new and interesting ways to spend their wealth. Costume balls and themed parties were all the rage. People would often spend large sums on elaborate outfits, even if they were only going to wear them once. After the event, these costumes would either be stored away or discarded. These extravagant parties were not just about having fun. They were a way for the wealthy to showcase their affluence and willingness to spend on fleeting pleasures. In the Gilded Age, the Vanderbilts' ball on March 26, 1883, stands out as a landmark event. To celebrate the inauguration of their New York townhouse, designed like a French chateau, Cornelius and Alva Vanderbilt threw a lavish costume ball. However, there was an underlying motive. The Vanderbilts, despite their immense wealth, were considered new money and hadn't yet been accepted into the elite circles of New York society. This was a sore point, particularly for Alva. Determined to change this, Alva orchestrated a grand affair, even allowing the media to tour their opulent home and report on the party's preparations. In a strategic move, she excluded certain old money families from the guest list, like the Astor family. This snub caught the attention of New York's social queen bee, Mrs. Astor, whose daughter was dying to receive an invitation. Left with little choice and societal pressure, Mrs. Astor extended her acknowledgement to the Vanderbilts by dropping off her calling card, a gesture marking their acceptance into high society. Alva was delighted. So was Mrs. Astor's daughter. Not so much Mrs. Astor. And the party was incredible. The costumes were custom-made and imported from Europe, featuring figures real and mythological from throughout European history. The house was decorated in silver and gold finery. Colorful flowers were abundant on every floor. One floor was transformed into a tropical garden, and rooms throughout were lit by Japanese lanterns. Thankfully for historians and the curious, Alva hired professional photographers for the event, and many of the photos taken that night have survived to prove that such a ball really took place. The only known solid gold toilet in the U.S. adorned a robber baron's mansion. The railroad tycoon family, the Garretts, bought a palatial evergreen estate near Baltimore, Maryland, in 1878. They immediately set to remodeling and making the place even grander than before. One upgrade involved building a theater, complete with stage, seating, and ticket window, for the matron of the house to perform for her guests in. The most ostentatious update was a golden bathroom which still exists today. The bathtub alone is covered in 23-karat gold leaf, and to date, it's also home to the only confirmed toilet seat of gold in the entire United States. Dinner parties involved dogs in $15,000 collars and lakes inside restaurants. Throughout much of the 19th century, the go-to restaurant for showing off was definitely Delmonico's in New York City. Endless lavish parties and dinners were held on the premises, with courses going from late afternoon into the early hours of the following morning. One of the grandest shows put on at Delmonico's involved the construction of an indoor landscaped garden, complete with a $10,000 lake in the middle. Swans were brought to swim and glide through the lake as guests enjoyed their meal. At a different dinner party thrown by a Mrs. Stuyvesant Fish, the guest of honor was Mrs. Fish's dog, adorned in a $15,000 collar for the occasion. Diamond Jim and Lillian Russell had gourmet eating contests. The Gilded Age was overflowing with over-the-top everything, including food consumption. Those folks had enormous appetites, and often the waistlines to prove it. But that wasn't such a big deal in those days. Prosperous men were expected to appear on the portly side as a symbol of their status, and wealthy women were encouraged to display their curves. 2 famous eaters from the Gilded Age include railroad tycoon Diamond Jim Brady and then A-list actress Lillian Russell. Brady's contemporary restaurant owner George Rector is said to have have claimed that Brady was the best 25 customers I ever had. Brady would start early with an elaborate lunch each day, often including 2 lobsters, deviled crabs, clams, oysters, and even beef. Dinner would include much more than lunch. According to author H. Paul Jeffers, Brady's dinners typically consisted of a couple dozen oysters, 6 crabs, and bowls of green turtle soup. The main course was likely to be 2 whole ducks, 6 or 7 lobsters, a sirloin steak, 2 servings of terrapin, and a variety of vegetables. When it came to beverages, Brady preferred to wash down his rich courses with a river of orange juice. On at least one recorded occasion, Brady and Lillian Russell decided to have a corncob eating competition. The Biltmore estate stretched across nearly 200,000 square feet of luxury. The Biltmore estate near Asheville, North Carolina, was constructed by George Washington Vanderbilt, the second between 1889 and 1896. The estate is enormous, covering nearly 11 miles. The building project of the main house, which has nearly 200,000 square feet, was such an undertaking that an entire working village was constructed near the site to house the workers, manufacturers, and supplies. A 3-mile railroad spur was even built just to transport building supplies to the construction site. More than 1,000 workers were hired to build the great house. The estate remains in the ownership of the Vanderbilt family, and it is the largest privately owned home in the United States. To help with the high cost of modern maintenance and expenses, the house and grounds are open to the public, and a number of ticketed events are held on the site throughout the year. Marble House was designed to outstaff, outdress, and outparty the competition. While most Americans and Europeans struggled to make basic ends meet, the Gilded Age elite struggled with one another, competing over who had the biggest, the most, the best of everything. Newport, Rhode Island, was prime real estate for the 19th century one-percenters, and some of the families worked hard to outdo their neighbors. When Cornelius Vanderbilt constructed his famous home, the Breakers, it was an attempt to one-up his brother, William Vanderbilt's latest showplace, Marble House. William designed and planned his Marble House to outstaff, outdress, and outparty his brother and other Gilded Age gents. The competition was so fierce that home construction of the super-rich was covered in the local newspapers on a daily basis. The Newport Mercury reported that Marble House had 500,000 cubic feet of imported marble, as well as paneled walls portraying gods from the classical age. Some walls were even coated in 22-karat gold leaf, all of it painstakingly applied by hand. Jewels were in demand and over the top. If Gilded Age wives were upset over their husbands' scandalous activities in upscale brothels, they had their husbands' money to comfort them. And, after all, no self-respecting robber baron would want his woman going about looking shabby. To that end, Gilded Age ladies literally dripped in jewels and other finery. Famous jewelers of the period, including Marcus & Company and Tiffany & Company, designed and provided a variety of gleaming works of art using rare materials, ranging from ebony to diamonds, sapphires, pearls, emeralds, aquamarines, enamels, and of course, much silver and gold. Plenty to keep a lonely wife warm at night. Sheets were changed twice a day, and outfits at least thrice. Another form of excess among the very rich during the Gilded Age had to do with the showing off of as many elaborate outfits as possible, as well as the presence of as many servants as possible. A Gilded Age household required the family to change their clothing up to several times or more per day. Morning suits and dresses were essential until just before lunch. Then, something perhaps lighter for the afternoon. Then, change again into something more formal for supper. Should one also have plans for hunting, hawking, or riding during the day, additional outfits would be required. The poor, overworked staff labored on without electric washing machines and dryers. Extreme dining sometimes took place on horseback. Most Gilded Age meals were elaborate affairs and almost always held indoors. However, there were certain notable exceptions. Naturally, the more outlandish, elaborate, and expensive, the better. On one occasion, millionaire Cornelius Billing hosted a horseback dinner at a swanky New York restaurant. Even the horses were treated like millionaires, as they were provided with their own individual bags of oats. All of this came at an enormous cost. Billing's bill came to $50,000, an amount unimaginable to most people in the world. Fancy private railroad cars were must-haves. One of the main objectives of life during the Gilded Age, if one could afford it, was to see and be seen in the most luxurious ways possible. The arrival of the Age of Rail was no exception. By the 1870s, private railroad cars were the most fashionable way to travel. Humble wooden coach seats were unacceptable. The very rich boarded their own entire rail cars, where the walls were lined in velvet, the upholstery plush, and the decor akin to a fancy parlor at home. The Gilded Age was a time of opulence, strategic social maneuvers, and the rise of new money families like the Vanderbilts, but the tales of ambition and societal navigation don't end there. If you're intrigued by the complexities of historical figures, our next video dives deep into another controversial personality, Joseph Kennedy. Many label him as a terrible human being, and we're about to uncover why. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.